All right, great to see everybody. Um, this is technically part two of a two-part exploration discussion of the Zen art of Hakuin. Hakuin lived in the Edo period. He's about 20 years older than Ben Franklin, to give a little context. And I'll say more about him and his art, of course, as we go along. There'll be a couple of slides repeated from the first go round for additional comment. As Rick intimated, I've been having a lot of fun getting to know this topic. I have some background in Buddhist studies and personal longstanding practice with Buddhist meditation techniques and particularly Zen techniques, but I wasn't particularly well acquainted with Hakuin and even less well acquainted with his art. And so it's been fun exploring the material, and I hope that comes across that it's fun. It includes the fact that I changed my presentation about 5 minutes before we started. I keep finding more interesting materials. And it's also reflected in an overabundance of written text on these slides. It's largely there for myself as sort of reminders of what I'm learning. I'm going to have certain things just underlined to cue me. And also the slides will be available one way or another, and anyone so interested can go back and look at some of the written material. But I know it can be potentially frustrating to have a whole lot of text that you don't have time to read. I invite you, to the degree that it works for you, to concentrate on the images, and if you'd like, go back later and have a look at some of the text. So here we go. Another comment I made last time is how plentiful are Hakuin's works. He did well over 1,000 images and calligraphy pieces, and how it's can be a bit frustrating to find out what the calligraphy means and or the inscriptions. These are 3 self-portraits. I could not find translations for the inscriptions. Many of them I do have translations for, and it will be quickly apparent how much Hakuin is looking to communicate things both through the images and through the words. And yet, what he's looking to communicate is more fundamental than words. And so often what he puts on his inscriptions are enigmatic, playful, provocative, and or poetic. We looked last time at some of his depictions of Hotei. Hotei was a Chinese monk, chubby fellow, always smiling, around whom people found it more or less impossible not to be in a good mood. And conjecture later was that he was an incarnation of the future Buddha. And Hakuin drew him in ways that look a lot like Hakuin. So this is outlined for what's coming. Sections include something called Hidden Buddha, looking at Hakuin's treatments of Mount Fuji, some plants and flowers he's done, a character named Otafuku, pictures of Kannon, the Bodhisattva of compassion, some of his calligraphy, and ending with something I call a flower and a smile. The image here is of an evening primrose. The image on the left, the yellow, is how we see an evening primrose. It's, I want to say, in the context of this talk, it's a sample of nature. It's a sample of what an evening primrose is. The image on the right is the same blossom, the same flower, photographed with film which detects ultraviolet. Bees, butterflies, moths can see ultraviolet. So it always tickles my mind how much of what we see, how much of our sensory experience of the living world is a story, is an interpretation, is a kind of poem. It's both itself and an emblem of what's there. I used this slide last time as a sort of gesture towards the period in which Hakuin lived. On the left is an image of the shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu, who pretty much conquered and pacified Japan after some years of turmoil, and inaugurated a couple of centuries worth of relative stability. On the right is a very famous image by Hokusai, who lived towards the end of this period. Very colorful, very well known in some regards, instance of art. This next slide is sort of the same thing. Next week, the new version of the TV show of James Clavo's book, Shogun, is going to start. And it's based on that same shogun, Tokugawa Ieyasu. And on the right there is another famous artist from this period, Hiroshige, who at the end of this period, called the Edo period, Europe was starting to get Japan to open up, as it were, to the rest of the world. And its art was influencing people like Van Gogh. Van Gogh copied a couple of the Hiroshige pieces, and I think he owned about a dozen prints. I liked this line from Basho, the famous haiku poet who lived a generation before Hakuin. Do not seek to follow in the footsteps of the wise ancients. Seek what they sought. And I like the quote, so I wanted an image of him. This is a picture by Hokusai of Basho. And I found out in the course of putting this together, there are apps, Apple Photos, where if you have a clear enough representation or depiction of these Chinese, Japanese characters, it will translate them for you. It will read them for you. In this case, they're pretty straightforward. This is a picture of Basho, and apparently is part of a series that Hokusai did, part 7. But on that theme of our technology in our day, interacting with art, Japanese creations, I came across a site of a fellow who had trained AI to do paintings in the Japanese style for some of Basho's poems. So Basho's poem here is: a crow alights on a withered branch, autumn dusk. His haiku bespeaking a kind of, and I hesitate, I don't pretend to be able to put it in words well, but using poems to invite us into an intimate engagement with the moment as it is. Here, it's a crow landing on a branch in the autumn at dusk. And this is what an AI program came up with as a depiction. And this, in the course of my seeking out materials from and about Hakuin, turns out one of his Bodhidharma paintings is the decoration for a sake. Now, back to the tradition and Hakuin. He did favorite motifs, favorite pictures, topics over and over. And we saw several of this fellow, Bodhidharma, last time. And on the inscription is the famous saying attributed to Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma is sort of the inaugural figure of the Zen tradition in China, Indian monk, which included the teaching pointing directly at the human heart, seeing true nature, realizing Buddhahood. That's the core understanding the Zen tradition has of itself and what it's about. As a little sidebar, and there'll be several sidebars as we go along, Hakuin's style of Japanese Zen is what's called Rinzai. The Rinzai school works a lot with koans. It is one of the two major forms of Zen in Japan, the other one being called Soto, and tracing its genesis to Dogen. Rinzai and Soto came to Japan around the same time, but pretty much all extant Rinzai Zen comes from Hakuin. Now, he revitalized the tradition and organized it. But this is another of the Zen phrases. No reliance on words and letters. Dogen wrote, not limited by language, the Dharma is ceaselessly expressed. So too the way of letters can display but not exhaust it. There's going to be this double message throughout. The images, the words are to be engaged with a kind of sincere mind and heart, and at the same time we're to allow them to point beyond themselves and help us connect with some living truth that's both profound and beautiful, and in a way utterly simple. Hakuin is most famous for the koan he devised. Koans are meditation techniques that are used to help us, again, engage with modes of experience that are more immediate, often more comprehensive than just our ideas and intellectual notions. His koan he devised, most of the koans come from stories of dialogues between a teacher and a student, most typically, where the student woke up or should have woken up based on what the teacher had provided them. Those stories, those lived encounters, effectively became the scriptures of the Zen tradition. They weren't focused on set Buddhist texts. There are hyperbolic stories of them throwing away the texts. Well, often they had already memorized them, so they could afford to dispense with them. But their interest is in communicating that it's not about the words, it's about what your heart knows. And so the scriptures ended up being collections of Zen stories, and culled from those stories would be a key word or key phrase used for meditation. Hakuin devised such a koan. If you clap your hands, you'll make a sound. But what will it sound like with one hand? hear that. It's an instruction. It's a kind of challenge given to Zen students to communicate, to know uh, what the sound of one hand could possibly be. Now, I'm going to do one of several sidebars here on the topic of hidden Buddha. In the course of learning about some of these materials, came across a not infrequent phenomenon across Japanese schools where an image or an art piece is only displayed periodically. I'll say more of that in a moment, but it called back this image from last time. This picture by a 13th century Chinese artist, Persimmons, is such a entity. This in its home temple is only displayed once a year. And it came to America last fall in a show, and it was the first time it had been outside of Japan in 8 centuries. Old school Buddhists, among the first introductions of Buddhism to Japan, included this image of a Buddha, and it is put on display once every 6 years. But what's more, what gets put on display is actually a copy of an image, a sculpture, which is never displayed. So it tickles my mind, this juxtaposition of a opportunity to encounter something directly and immediately and right in front of you in the form of an art piece, juxtaposed with this suggestion that it's not always available. There's some depth to it. Both things at the same time. To use Western words, an immanence and a transcendence being enacted by showing these things only on occasion. This is another example, a statue for Canon. Canon's name came from a translation of the Chinese translation of the Sanskrit word or name for a bodhisattva of compassion, he who hears the cries of the world and responds compassionately. He became a she in China. Avalokiteshvara in India was understood to be a version of the goddess of mercy, Guan Yin, in China, and pronounced Canon in Japan. And in this characterization, this discussion of, again, another hidden artwork, that even the priests in the temple were forbidden from viewing the statue, which was wrapped in white cloth and brought out once each spring and fall. That reference to a white cloth tickled my mind, and I'll let you know why in a moment. This is another picture of that statue and of the structure, the hall that it's housed in. Back to Hakuin. His temple was in a small town. The town, however, was on a sort of major thoroughway between Kyoto and Tokyo. So it got a fair amount of traffic. But it was within, he could see Fuji from his temple, Mount Fuji. And playing on that motif of something both present and veiled, a white cloth or clouds or snow, He, as we'll see, played with that dance of disclosure and obscuration. And my suspicion is that's why he named himself Hakuin, which letters literally mean concealed in white. He could be very playful. He could be a little bawdy. Here it's playful. He's referencing Fuji as a woman, as a love interest, and wrote poems like, "Beloved, O Fuji, above the clouds, meeting under a clearing sky, I see your snowy white skin. Take off your robe of haze, Miss Fuji. I want to see your snowy skin." Playing with the elements of affection and beauty, romance even, and this call to be present. He did, of course, a lot of calligraphy, and I'll have a whole section of calligraphy examples coming up. This one translates as "true mountain covered with cloud." And here is another depiction of Fuji, about which I'm going to have several slides to discuss. The inscription reads, "I've portrayed the true face of the old barbarian Bodhidharma and present it to the priest of Jisoji." So Jisoji is a temple. Its main priest had asked Hakuin if he would do a picture of Bodhidharma for him. And so he gave him this picture of Mount Fuji, saying, "This is the face of Bodhidharma." Bodhidharma, again, being the largely legendary founder and emblem of the Zen tradition. The truth of Zen is the truth of Bodhidharma, is the truth of Mother Nature, is Mount Fuji. However, a lot of other things are going on in this image. My friend Tony alerted me to this talk online of a contemporary Zen priest pointing out the political engagement Hakuin enacted. And the slide there shows pictures of a letter that Hakuin wrote to a political leader. That letter would have gotten anybody else in a lot of trouble. Hakuin had too high a standing to actually be punished, but the letter was suppressed. It didn't see the light of day for a century. What Hakuin is, among the things Hakuin is doing in this picture, is displaying a ostentatious and to his mind, inexcusable expense in the form of marching mighty retinue to the capital. There was a system where the shogun, the ruler of Japan, would have his feudal lords keep some of their possessions and their family members at the capital for a year, and then they could go back for a year, and had to make trips back and forth to reconnect with their families as a way to keep them under control. But those lords ended up making a great big expensive show of it. And Hakuin said, "Why on earth are you spending so much money on these shows when common people could use those resources?" There are 62 figures and 12 horses in that picture. So he's making a political statement. He's also making a Zen statement. As I said, he'd been asked to do that painting, or do a painting of Bodhidharma. for another priest, a fellow priest. And he gives him this picture of the mountain of Fuji. And also in the inscription, he alludes to a Boys' Day festival in December, but it was actually a festival that happened in May. And he talks about straw sheep and a wooden man, things which were kind of parables or metaphors for non-existent things, impossible things. So in saying the wrong date for a festival and alluding to things which don't exist, the suggestion is he's referring to something non-conceptual. His followers, and I'll reference followers a few times, sometimes went back and made inscriptions or explanations for some of the artwork. And this they took to be a reference Hakuin's making to the sound of one hand, something I will not be able to explain or communicate, but that's by design. Again, hearing the sound of one hand is hearing the sound of life, of something before our philosophies, before we have words like religion or Buddhism, a living, simple, immediate miracle, which we don't so much grasp as we allow to grasp us. So this is a quick reference to what we might call it a meme in our day. There was a famous 12th century poet and nature lover named Saigyo, who artists ever after him were fond of painting looking at Mount Fuji. So these are three examples, and there are many more, of Saigyo, the poet, gazing at Mount Fuji. Where this arrow is pointing, you can't see it here, but it's blown up on the right. Hakuin has put Saigyo in his painting of Mount Fuji, looking at the mountain while all this other stuff is also going on. Saigyo's in there. So this little section is going to be a couple examples of nature paintings Hakuin did. And not infrequently, the inscription he will put on these will be a line from a piece of literature. Here, he's done a picture of chrysanthemums and this calligraphy. I'll say, by the way, the translations online cannot deal with this calligraphy, as so often it's very, very creative, very artistic, very expressive. Writing in itself becomes an art form. But the inscription translates as quietly gazing at the distant southern hills. And it's got the image of a chrysanthemum there. And it comes from, it's a reference to a poem by a 8th century Chinese poet, which includes the lines, picking chrysanthemums by the eastern hedge, I can see the distant southern hills. In these things, there is a fundamental truth. But when I begin to express it, I lose the words. It's hard to see, but there's the little bird in this picture. And the picture's called Plum and Sparrow. There was a classic Zen story where a teacher named Jiao Zhou was asked, why did Bodhidharma come from the West? Bodhidharma, sometimes playfully referred to as a barbarian and depicted with facial hair, was a missionary of sorts. It came from India, the home country for Buddhism, and taught meditation in China and was understood to be the initiator of what became the Zen tradition. So to ask, why did Bodhidharma come from India is kind of like asking, what's the meaning and purpose of Zen, of our tradition? Why did Bodhidharma come from the West? Jiao, a profound Zen teacher, answered, the oak tree in the courtyard. The truth, the presence, the matter-of-fact natural wonder of an oak tree is why Zen happens. So referencing that story, Hakuin has made a picture of a bird on a plum tree with the caption, the winter plum, clearly the meaning of the coming from the West. There's a whole bunch of text. But I wanted to include this image of a landscape piece. It's a mountain called Eagle Head, and down below it are some folks in boats, fishermen. And this time, Hakuin's inscription is quoting a folk song. And the folk song has the lines, if you look up, you'll see me. If you look down, you can see the sweet fish of Shige and Shishihama. Once more, his students have seen here a reference to the sound of one hand with a possible reference. There's a famous story, which is the legendary genesis of the whole Zen tradition, when Buddha is going to do a talk at a scheduled time on a place called Vulture Peak, which can also be understood to mean Eagle Peak. He's going to do a talk, and when it's time, he picks up a flower and turns it in his hand. A monk named Kashyapa smiles. Kashyapa gets it, that the flower is the talk. The flower is the sermon. Buddha turning a flower is communicating the message of awakening of Zen. This is a picture of Hote once more, the laughing monk. And here he's got a puppet. And the puppet is a famous folk heroine, Otafuku. She's also, which her name translates as much good fortune. She was sometimes portrayed as a friend of Hakuin's. She's very famous in Japan generally. Here, Hakuin is playing with a suggestion from another school of Buddhism, Pure Land Buddhism, where it's sometimes compared to a Protestant Christian approach, in that they place their faith on the celestial figure, Amida, and to be reborn in a kind of heaven and work on enlightenment there. And the suggestion is a founder of that school, Pure Land, chanted the Buddha's name, and the words turned into Amida Buddha, that celestial Buddha. And Hakuin says, well, if they can do that, how much might it be good if we can make Otafuku come to life? Here she's making some dumplings. And she says, they're ready. but the poor man, his throat is closed. This is a reference to someone who uh, can't be fed, can't be nourished, can't accept, integrate, take on the truth and wisdom and wholesome benefits of Buddhist teaching and Buddhist practice. So she's a playful image of what's available to us in compassion and wisdom if we're ready to accept it. Here, a rather playful, risque image, Otofuku is curing a fellow's hemorrhoids with moxibustion, with heat. The inscription seems that he has hemorrhoids, so I gave him a little bit of fire. On her kimono is the character for long life, which Hakuin used a lot, and my sense is it's a reference to the beautiful life or the awakened life or a timeless life. The fellow, on the other hand, on his clothing is the character Money. And the suggestion is she's looking to cure his focus on money. And Hakuin, forever making multiple references at the same time, has in the back of his mind the opening line of a Buddhist text which said, respect isn't given to someone for their riches. It's given to someone for their wisdom. But as it turns out, the character for wisdom has the same sound as the character for hemorrhoids. So he's got multiple associations going on here with the suggestion that a good life, a long life, isn't about having money and possessions. She is still popular. This is from a contemporary, this is the logo for a contemporary food line in Japan, Otofuku Foods, which prides itself on giving service with a smile. And I came across this image. Someone later has made a ceramic display of Hakuin giving Otofuku a peach. Another motif is the Bodhisattva of compassion, Kanon. She who hears the sounds and prayers of everyone. That hearing, Hakuin suggests, that presence, that open-hearted and heart-opening engagement with life is what the sound of one hand is about. And he suggests if you're really awake, everything is Kanon. The whole world is this loving, compassionate, creatively helpful activity. He did lots of pictures of Kanon. This one's a little bit humorous, depicting Kanon as a government official working at a desk with a landscape painting in the background, with again the suggestion that it's actually the world of nature that is the truth of Kanon, that is the embodiment of kind wisdom. Kanon again. The inscription is no land not manifest. Those are words taken from a famous Buddhist scripture, the Lotus Sutra, which says, through the world, in all directions, there's no land where Kanon is not present, is not manifest. And here he has her meditating. Much of his work is in monochrome, is in black ink. Occasionally, he did do pieces in color. This is one, again, depicting Canon with the playful inscription. Canon is so busy, she needs a break every now and then. Maybe this is why our wishes aren't always answered right away. So I'm going to do several examples of Hakuin's very creative calligraphy. He's got the character for always stretched the length of the side of the image with the inscription reading, "Always pray to the Bodhisattva Canon." In this one, the middle character is the character for middle. And the inscription reads, "Zen practice in the middle of activity is superior to that pursued within tranquility." Hakuin says, what's true meditation is to make everything, coughing, swallowing, waving your arms, motion, stillness, words, action, the evil and the good, prosperity and shame, gain and loss, right and wrong, into a single koan. Again, I don't pretend to fully understand that, other than the sense I get that all of life is the miracle. And he's urging us to open not only to that possibility, but to that lived experience. Nothing can surpass meditation in the midst of activity. This calligraphy, this is originally not one thing, referencing a poem from the sixth patriarch, famous legendary figure in the Zen tradition in China, who wrote a famous poem that had that line in it. Originally, there's not one thing. And the character there for not is pronounced mu in Japanese. And that was another koan, also involving Zhao Zhou, teacher referred to earlier. Zhao Zhou was once asked, does a dog have Buddha nature? And it's an odd question because in that tradition, in that form of Buddhism, it's understood that all sentient beings, all living things have a potential for awakening. And that potential is their Buddha nature. All living things have Buddha nature. A monk asked the Zen teacher, his Japanese pronunciation is Joshu, his Chinese is Zhao Zhou. A monk asked Zhao Zhou, does the dog have Buddha nature? And Zhao Zhou said, no. My hunch is, in this case, Zhao Zhou is telling the monk not to think so much, not to worry so much. Stop making stuff up. No, stop. And that became a single syllable koan, still practiced today. There are three major starting koans in contemporary Rinzai Zen. This is one of them. No, mu. It doesn't make any sense. Just let this non-discursive, comprehensive negation of anything artificial or contrived have you. Mu, 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 mu. That's one koan. The other is the sound of one hand. And a third is from a teacher named Basui, which comes down to, in effect, just asking, what is this? What? Or what is hearing this sound? What? Just what? Those are the three first koans typically assigned to practitioners in this tradition. looking at information about that particular painting, I came across this copy of it on a 1969 Japanese art magazine. This is simply the second character here is sort of like ditto marks. It's a repeat of the character that comes before it. And the one that comes before it is an emblem of the sun, and it means day. And I put this in both just for the simple beauty of it, but also as an example, you can get your very own copy from Walmart for just $100. It's kind of intriguing how much of Hakuin's art is out there for purchase in different copies. And this figure is a Taoist deity. Taoism, among forms of Taoism are attention to prolonging life and conserving vital energy and moving vital energy from our loins to our minds, to our heads. So sometimes these deities have great big old heads. And this is the same Taoist deity, a copy of which you can have for just $25,000. More calligraphy. This is the character for death. The Zen tradition specifically, and Buddhism more generally, invite us to, on the one hand, ease into the miracle of being alive. And on the other hand, to hurry up, waste no time. We aren't here forever. Let's get on with it. Another style of calligraphy, this time with some color. With the inscription, if you see with your ears and listen with your eyes, doubts will fall away their own accord like water dropping off leaves. Not totally adequate, but I'm reminded with this of the bumper sticker, which says, don't just do something, stand there. These are examples of calligraphy he did for adherents of forms of Buddhism that were not Zen Buddhism. I've referenced briefly already the Pure Land Buddhism, where there's a celestial Buddha named Amida. And here he's printed out their mantra, Namu Amida Butsu, which is just sort of honor to Amida Buddha. And the other one is from Lotus Sutra school. And it reads, homage to the Lotus Sutra, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. And some members of that school chant that for prosperity and happiness and satisfaction and fulfillment. And in our day, Tina Turner was a practitioner of that school and said, matter of factly, it really, really, really enriched her life. Another form of calligraphy, this one is of the name of a Buddhist protector, a kind of a metaphysical force. The Sanskrit emblem is there on the right, and Hakuin's calligraphy of it is on the left. And he's done it to make it look like the entity he's naming. The entity is pretty fierce, but the fierceness is directed towards ending illusions and letting go of distractions. A protector of the tradition, a protector of the participants, the adherents, the practitioners. But again, just showing some of Hakuin's range, doing all sorts of traditions and currents within Buddhism, and the creativity, the way he would use calligraphy to communicate messages, teachings, forces. And he did pieces for non-Buddhist practitioners. In his day, there were certainly, it was able, distinctions could be made, but it was less a demand to be only one thing. There's some of that still in Japanese culture that sometimes us raised, especially in Christian circles, have are not quite expecting. As in a generation ago, a poll of religious affiliation I once heard about in Japan, about 3%. The question is, what religion do you practice? And about 3% said they practiced Christianity. About 65% said they practiced Confucianism. 72% said they practiced Buddhism, and 75% said they practiced Shinto. The Christians tended to just do Christianity, but the others, it just wasn't the same concept that we often have, that you're one or the other. You may go to a Confucian Taoist astrologer on the occasion of the birth of a child, and to a Shinto shrine to get married, and go to a temple Buddhist priest for your funeral. Real quick example of further creativity in calligraphy, he's made a figure. He's done a drawing out of the characters for this figure's poetry. He took a poem this fellow named Hitomaru wrote and made it into Hitomaru. Another example, Tenjin is a Shinto god, scholarship and calligraphy and poetry, and Hakuin has drawn a picture of him out of calligraphy. So I'm coming towards the end here, further sort of underscoring the commonality across traditions, or at least the potential to find rewarding information and practices in different traditions. This is titled The Three Tasters, and it's a picture of Confucius and a Buddha and Lao Tzu, the Taoist. 3 creeds, 1 creed. So that was to be the conclusion of the presentation. I have a couple of add-ons here. The beginning of the Zen tradition in India with Buddha, I referred to earlier the flower sermon, where he picks up a flower and the monk Kashyapa gets it. And references made earlier to the way Zen characterizes itself as the tradition not depending on words and letters, the transmission outside the scriptures. Those words are attributed to Buddha himself. He's given this non-verbal, non-limited realization and teaching to Kashyapa, and Kashyapa becomes, in effect, the first Zen teacher. Hakuin offers a comment. There won't be too many who can fully appreciate the real significance of Kashyapa's smile, but when you get it, that's the true transmission. I used earlier a picture of evening primrose photographed in ordinary light and photographed with a film sensitive to ultraviolet. I've used that in other talks. It's a favorite story. It's a favorite example of how we see things is a poem, is a production, is a display. I now live in Asheville, and last spring woke up and looked out my window and there's an evening primrose growing on the bank behind my bedroom. I offer an example of a modern artist who is with us today, who has gifted me with the picture Zen inspired. And so I love it. Thanks so much, Deirdre. And one final kind of PS. This again is that image of Hote invoking or manifesting Otafuku. And when I was looking for information about this image, I came across this sign online and realized it was an advertisement for a show of Hakuin art done in Tokyo a few years back. And I'm going to conclude this presentation with 5 minutes from that show, a video they made to advertise it. I don't know the Japanese, but the images, in effect, speak for themselves. Here we go. That's the talk. Any comments?
The word koan is Japanese, is by best I can discern, for the comprehension that all life is awakening. How else might we describe koan?
So it's an invitation, playful on my part, but I'm again reminded of that bumper sticker. Don't just do something, stand there. It's an invitation to be the wonder and simple miracle that that we are, that always is. And if I'm remembering right, the Chinese, which is Gong'an, was a reference to a legal case. The stories, the Zen tradition in China playfully taking these stories, these dialogues, as precedents for fundamental principles of life, like a test case in law. So that's a take on koan. Most of them, as I say, the vast majority come from actual dialogues, conversations. Hakuin made one up. He made up that one by listening to the one hand. Deirdre, was your hand up a moment ago?
Oh yeah, I was struck by the difference when your slide, Dave, showed the home altar with the one image that is on display periodically only, and then at the end in the museum where we're in a traditional museum room where there are images and graphics and paintings one after another, and just the stark difference between the quality of that kind of experience.
Yes, and to my mind, what you're noting speaks to that sort of dual message, that there's something like the patterns of ultraviolet display in a flower. It's there, but we don't see it. What we do see, though, is also beautiful. And so there's the simultaneous invitation to engage with the Buddha, with the beauty here and now as things appear, with an understanding, on the other hand, that it's but an emblem, it's a sample of the living truth. There are other things that are other than our habitual ways of thinking and seeing things. So, double message. Hakuin spread his materials out all over the place. Some Buddhist art is only shown once a year, once every 6 years, or never, as a reminder that there's something of worth and wonder in there. And we're not to rest too complacently in the way things merely appear. And yet, it's right here too.
Mm.
Tony's hand was up.
Oh, yes. I just first wanted to express my appreciation for the way that you laid this all out, and we could see all these different styles that he worked in, all these different ways of creating art, different things he was trying to do and communicate. But I'm wondering, in the end, you know, from going through this process yourself, you know, learning about these different things, is there anything about either the insights you got from it or some visual that you came across? Is there something that especially spoke to you the most through all of this discovery that you went through?
I'm fond of saying there's a miracle going on. There really is, and it's everything. Engaging with this artwork, engaging with Hakuin, didn't do a whole lot of his actual writings and teachings. But he's both profound and playful and self-deprecating. Some of his descriptions of himself make him sound kind of histrionic, standing outside a person's home on the typical daily begging route, looking for alms, and he gets distracted. He's caught up in his koan, and the house he's staying in front of doesn't have anything to offer. And the woman is getting annoyed that he's just standing there. So she hits him with a stick. He falls down into the mud and has a revelation. Something came through, the miracle of being alive. I use this story often. I went through, many of you know, what it's like to die as a child, a near drowning. I was 7 years old, underwater so long I lost consciousness. I was dredged out, resuscitated, and as I'm coming back into life, before I remember my name, before I have the cognition, oh, this means I didn't die, vomits coming out of my mouth and nose, everything hurts. And it was beautiful. It was wonderful. It was a privilege to be in pain. That anything at all was happening was its own worth. That's my suspicion. What happened to Hakuin was hit by a stick and falls in the mud. Something came and got him, a realization. So in answer to the question, I'm encouraged. This was fun to do. And all these additional modes of expression, of gesturing towards provoking and celebrating life's worth and wonder. That's what I'm grateful for in working with these materials. John?
I was really taken by that kind of like a koan or teaching note. The the teacher saying, just stop talking, worrying, that it sounded a bit like just a reminder that this eternal truth is transcendent beyond words. And it also called to mind the sculptures of the hidden Buddha, the idea that they're only brought out intermittently, occasionally, with the idea that this initially this ultimate reality is transcendent. We only get glimpses of it, whether just walking in nature or looking at reading a koan, or it could be in some meditative state. But initially it's transcendent. But as we all become Buddha, or can you say that we all become Buddha, or at least we gain Buddha consciousness?
We realize what we've always already been.
Right.
That miracle, that truth, that simple fact, and a name for that is Buddha.
Right.
Etymologically, Buddha means awakened.
Yes.
Among the things your comment reminds me of is that gesture of Hote. What is the sound of one hand? I'm now associating also the invitation to just stop. Just stop.
Right.
And now that I've said that, I'm reminded there is in Buddhist art, iconography, images of the Buddha making that gesture, and
Yeah.
it's called the elephant stopping gesture.
Ah.
Elephant's charging at him, he just says, chill. As a further association, that mu koan, the no koan, everybody knows the dog has Buddha nature. Everything that's alive has Buddha nature. And
Right.
Jiao says, no. Another time, another monk asked the same question, asked Jiao, does a dog have Buddha nature? And Jiao said, yes. My fantasy is that in that instance, he's offering encouragement. He's reassuring that particular monk. Just open up to it. It's here. Everything's okay. Let it have you. In the first instance, again, this is my projection onto it, but in the first instance, he's saying, stop. Stop making sense. Get out of your head, get into your life, get into your bones, and find Buddha there. We're to our time, actually a little over time. I'm grateful to all of y'all for coming and contributing, and to Rick for provoking me into doing such a thing. Further comments? Deirdre, you have another?
This is going to sound so self-serving. I've not seen that collage of mine in a long time, and I wonder if you could go back for just a moment and let me see it again. Is that possible?
I think so.
Thank you.
Any other comments while I pull that up?
This has been wonderful. I'll say that. As an artist, this has just been wonderful. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's a lovely piece, and I feel grateful. I feel lucky to have it, fortunate.